My bros, my homies, my ninjas. Do you remember how the gay community took the word queer that used to be a pejorative, used to be a slur, and really kind of turned it around and made it into a word of pride? Well, the same thing happened to the term dark web. Now, I personally used to think about dark web as a place you could find some horrible, depressing child porn from Thailand, as opposed to, I guess, child porn that's not horrible and depressing. I don't know what I'm saying. You could also get like a hit contract. You could get somebody to assassinate that one Ukrainian whore who disrespected you. I mean, there were, you could buy some illicit drugs or some unmarked guns that were already probably used to kill somebody. I mean, this was the dark web. But then here on this very amazing website, YouTube, there arose something different. An intellectual dark web. It's kind of like they're edgy, and yet they're on fucking YouTube. They're very edgy, and CNN isn't ready for these motherfuckers. CNN isn't ready for these red pills, for this amazing fucking intellectual dark web. So let's get to the luminaries. Of course, there was one big impressive one, Dave Rubin. Man, that fucking blank stare of wisdom. I mean, Jesus, it's just like a mannequin looking at you, but one who wants reasonable discourse, alright? That's that guy. Then there's the Professor Jordan, guess how much I make on Patreon, because I ain't telling no more. Peterson, I mean, he really kind of feeds us the wisdom here on the intellectual dark web. Very dark, very profound. It's Jordan Peterson, my dudes. Now we have an assortment, almost like a petting zoo, of different fucking racist animals who are really interested in IQ disparities and dropping those red pills. We got fucking bears, we got pigeons, I mean, we got all kinds of shit. This is the dark web as I know it, the intellectual dark web. We got some random homeless rapists that people seem to respect a lot. We have ASMR Darling. I'm sorry, is she one of them? Well, okay, well, fuck it. I think she is. I mean, I remember her telling me something about why Japan is allowed to have an ethno-state and we don't, but maybe it wasn't her. Maybe everything is blending in my head now, and I don't know what the fuck is going on.
At least this brutal drought hasn't taken your poor grandma.
That's my daughter. She's 14.
Ooh, nice and legal.
That's the dark web. That's the foundation of our knowledge here on YouTube. Now, unless you're a complete ass clown, you must have heard by now of the famous Dutch philosopher Sergei Schopenhauer. His whole shit was thesis, antithesis. Got you, you dumbass. It's pronounced antithesis. Well, anyway, so, this kind of intellectual dark web had to have a pushback. Something had to emerge to challenge this political climate on YouTube. And so we have the counterwave that you are, I'm sure, familiar with, because probably you watch the same shit and get the same fucking suggestions on YouTube. So if we look at this radar of the counteroffensive, we have, of course, Sean, we have ContraPoints, we have Three Arrows, guys like that. And I think I'm seeing something on the side of the radar. I think there's something there on the side of the radar, and I'm not sure what it is. It looks completely insignificant. It looks utterly overlooked, and it looks like a little turd emoji. Oh, that's my dudes, that's me. I just whoa, that's me. It's so nice to be included there. I've included myself there and put myself in total irrelevance where I belong. So yeah, there is a kind of a natural pushback. I merely do it out of opportunism. I could give a shit about any of this. It's just like my first video about Peterson attracted a lot of views, and I found myself. I have been put into the antithesis wave just basically by the algorithm, by the demand for it, or at least, fuck it, let's just fucking move on. Who fucking gives a shit? Hi. How's that for a transition graphic? So now there is a newcomer, Cuck philosophy. Cuck philosophy. What a fucking name. The name got me wet already. Because we like that irony. They're not really saying they're cucks. Why would they? They're not cucks. But they kind of dismiss the whole cuck alpha dichotomy with this name. It's like they're laughing at the people who use the word cuck seriously. And we already like that. We like that already. It's kind of like that low-key fucking irony. I'm just gonna use cuck like it's nothing. It's the guys. They're our guys. It's cuck fucking philosophy. Would David Foster Wallace like the name cuck philosophy? Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. He probably wouldn't, but he's dead, so who gives a shit? Alright, Cuck philosophy is the new channel. So they really went after the luminaries already. They went after Canadian Jesus, and they're going after Sam Harris now. Their latest video kind of poo-poos his moral landscape. And the thing about Cuck philosophy is it's just some group of hipsters. I think it's like a hipster dude and his girlfriend, and they kind of put their smarty pants on and give us the philosophical fucking perspective and shit. Here's what I have to say about philosophy. I think that philosophy, dude, they think they navigate in meanings, dude, of existence, but they navigate in fucking language, dude. Have you ever heard that shit? It's very deep. Well, anyway, I just think that to philosophy, everything was stripped away from it. Science, basic discussions about life in a way went elsewhere into literature, into other places. Fucking even pseudo-science like psychology was stripped away from philosophy. And the only relevant part of philosophy today is political philosophy, I think, because it connects to the average idiot. All other philosophy doesn't, but if it doesn't connect with the idiot, it means that it's not real in a sense, because most people are idiots. Whereas like with fucking politics, you hear everybody's a fucking classical liberal, you know that it fucking matters still, in a way that all other philosophy fucking doesn't. And so for me as an idiot myself, it's just the amount of effort I would have to dedicate to studying philosophy versus the insights I would get out of it nowadays, I think is not favorable. So I choose to waste my life in a myriad of other ways. But the reason I brought up that shit is to say this thing. As I'm going to be critiquing this video, I'm not actually reacting against the underlying philosophy. I'm reacting against this philosophy as it is presented by the hipsters at fucking Cuck philosophy, okay? It's kind of like if somebody says, your mom's a whore, talking about your mother, not mine. And I say, oh, she's a vile whore. And then you run into and say, no, she's not a whore at all. Dude, the truth has already been established here. Fucking get the fuck out of here with your fucking epistemology, you fucking piece of shit. Your mom's a whore. So the point I'm making is that I'm reacting solely against fucking Cuck philosophy. I don't know about fucking Hegel. I don't know shit about Descartes. I was even too fucking lazy to fucking skim their Wikipedia, dude. All we're doing is fucking criticizing Cuck philosophy and their perceptions of incels. They use philosophy. It's very fancy pants fucking Cuck philosophy, this move, incels and philosophy. Let's watch it, okay?
Throughout modern history, there have been two opposing ways of viewing the individual. The first one is exemplified by Descartes' I think, therefore I am. In his book, Meditations on First Philosophy, Descartes wanted to establish a firm foundation for all knowledge, and he attempted to do this by what is called methodic doubt. By doubting everything that he possibly could doubt, he wanted to see what is then left over, what could not possibly be doubted.
One clear example that leaps to mind is Crimea being a part of Russia. It's true on different levels of analysis. Historical level, the level of a democratic referendum.
Уверен, что и 2014 год войдет в его летопись. В летопись всей нашей страны, как год, когда живущие здесь народы твердо определили быть вместе с Россией. Тем самым подтвердили свою верность исторической правде и памяти наших предков.
Totally democratic. And the third level, which is the level of cucking. My dude, Ukrainian nationalism, talk about fucking cuck philosophy.
And this would serve as a solid foundation for all further knowledge. The first thing Descartes found that he could not doubt is his own existence as a thinking subject, hence, I think, therefore I am. This is an approach that identifies the thinking subject in a vacuum, in isolation from the rest of the world, and therefore sees the individual as separate from others, as atomized. It leads to a view of the mind as a kind of private theater, where knowledge of oneself can be achieved through introspection. Although Descartes' goal was to set forth a theory of knowledge, this is the kind of view that commonly serves as a foundation for certain ethical, political, and economic theories, which see society simply as the sum of separate, atomized individuals.
My dude, remember that hot girl you used to go to high school with, and you just had a lot of fun during chemistry lab and talk and laugh with each other, and recently you tried to reconnect with her on Facebook and she never accepted your friend request? You know who fucking I blame for that shit? It's Descartes. Motherfucker, it's that alienation. It's just the splintering of a society. Why doesn't she care about you as a human being? Because she thinks, therefore she is. But she's a dumb fucking bitch, dude. She has a very limited perspective, man. She needs to expand herself. And you know what else? I personally fucking blame Descartes for all of the struggles, all of the issues of our age with capitalism and with different shoes, sneakers I want to buy that I can't afford, and I have to wonder if I'm going to be one of these squares who just, fucking wears cool sneakers to fucking look cool, and so I go for fucking Skechers, slip-on shit that I buy on Amazon. My dude, it's fucking Descartes. What's with this alienation? What is this with this fucking splintering, man? This fucking Descartes, every time I open fucking Pornhub, there are all these violent, seductive categories, and I just go deeper and deeper trying to find something. I don't know what I'm looking for at the end. At the end, I'm always at the bottom of the fucking barrel with some guttural shit there, man. Is this what I think, therefore I am, man? I look for something, therefore I am, but what do I find? I don't even want to say what I find on there, man. It's truly fucking depraved. So I guess the point I'm making here is that I think they've already kind of prejudiced the pull against Descartes by basically linking him to atomization and alienation of our society and some political theories that I don't know if they are or aren't connected with Descartes, but it doesn't seem relevant to this specific issue. It seems like basically it's just kind of a trite leftist thing here where they're like, look at Descartes with his fucking bourgeois fucking individualism and look what it brought us.
The second way of making sense of the individual is one found in Hegel. For Hegel, Descartes' method of identifying the thinking subject is fundamentally deficient because it does this in isolation from other individuals. Although Descartes performed his methodic doubt in isolation, he did this already having been affected by other individuals, something that cannot be simply doubted away. It's arguable that Descartes wouldn't have been able to make sense of himself as a thinking subject if he did not have language, which is always interpersonal and depends on other conscious subjects. He also arguably would not have attempted to find a firm foundation for all knowledge if he did not have educational institutions, which gave him the conceptual and theoretical tools to do this.
Now this sounds to me like one of those, like gonorrhea and your mom, like chicken and egg type of things where they're so interrelated, it's hard to say which came first. And here it's like, yeah, you have your basic thinking, and of course it's influenced and defined by your society to a large degree. Like if I were to redefine it from I think therefore I am to I am aware therefore I am, then yeah, I would definitely agree with the latter. Because for anything to happen at all in your consciousness, you have to have basic awareness. If you doubt your basic awareness, then you go into all this fucking bullshit. What if we live in a fucking simulated fucking video game? What if we're just a morsel on like a pubic hair of some Armenian taxi driver, but in fact it's not an Armenian taxi driver because that's just the closest conception we have of it, and in fact this pubic hair is beyond anything. It's just like this kind of bullshit. Like, I think just basically acknowledging basic awareness is the foundation for knowledge and perception and everything else, and that trounces social interactions.
To put it simply, Hegel's point is that there is no such thing as a self-conscious, isolated individual. To be capable of self-reflection and to even make sense of myself as an individual, my consciousness must develop alongside other individuals. I must make sense of myself with reference to other individuals. No matter how individualistic you consider yourself to be, your identity and self-consciousness always exists with reference to other individuals.
So I'm not entirely sure why Emo Peterson made an appearance at this point in the video, because he certainly isn't an individualist in a total sense of the word, and if he's presented here as such, then that's complete bullshit. I mean, Peterson constantly talks about us living in relation to the hierarchy, living in relation to the archetypes that have evolved in our collective unconsciousness. That's not total individualism by any means, and I guess it's either that they're very stupid and don't know Peterson the way I do, or they just decided to put in a random video of a crying man there for some reason, a random video of Peterson. So as far as their larger point, yeah, we definitely do live in relation to others. We do live referencing other individuals, but that's different from being completely defined by them. If we were constantly defined by other people, we, by our nature, presumably wouldn't be able to harm them. Criminals wouldn't exist. Human society would function like one macroorganism. And the reason it doesn't is because we process our information. We process these references. We process these other people. Whether we have free will or not is not relevant to what I'm saying right now, but we have our own predisposition through which we filter others. And so I would still argue in this kind of a chicken or egg thing that you first and foremost have to have basic awareness, and that presupposes a kind of individualism. Again, whether or not you have free will is irrelevant. And with that in mind, that would then have to be the foundation. That basic awareness would have to be the foundation of knowledge, as opposed to your series of relationships with your coworkers and family and etc. Because your knowledge cannot possibly be aligned with everyone.
So how do we use this idea to make sense of incels, the community of misogynists who call themselves involuntarily celibate and see the fact that they cannot get laid as an injustice done against them by women? Let's start by looking at Hegel's famous master-slave dialectic, which he laid down in the phenomenology of spirit under the name of lordship and bondage.
A few years ago, my friend Boris invited me to this club, Lordship and Bondage, in Detroit. And once I got there, man, I didn't get the right vibes. I felt kind of off. And what happened next really disturbed me for the rest of my life, man. These fucking freaks, you know, the fucking motherfuckers jumped out of nowhere, man. They took off Boris's pants and started fucking pulling on his foreskins. And the whole club fucking started chanting, "Let's see how far that baby can go." And these motherfuckers were just fucking pulling and pulling on that shit. I'm not gonna deny it. I was kind of curious to see how far it would go, but it went far enough for me, dude. I was afraid I was next on the chopping block, as it were, because in fact there was no chopping there, but you know what I mean. Dude, I was born in the Soviet Union. I was fucking leery of the whole thing, man. I took off, motherfucker. I skedaddled my ass out of there. Fucking lordship and bondage. And the whole reason I just bring it up right now is because ever since that event, I have been very wary of Hegel.
Which is an important statement on recognition. The master-slave dialectic is kind of an abstract model about consciousness. In this model, two subjects meet. Each subject wants to see themselves reflected in the other subject, but cannot because the other appears as foreign to them. This leads to a battle between the two subjects. The victor spares the loser because it needs the recognition of the other to affirm oneself. The loser submits out of fear of death, and this leads to a relationship of master and slave. However, this relationship is deficient. The master wants to be recognized by the slave, but his recognition is never enough, because the slave is seen as less than human and therefore is not capable of fully recognizing the other. Conversely, the slave wants recognition too, but cannot be given full recognition recognition because the master sees them as less than human. This flawed relationship leads to a downward spiral in which neither the slave nor the master can receive the recognition they need to be fully self-conscious, and neither are fully humanized.
At least the way they've presented it here makes this whole master-slave dialectic seems utterly irrelevant and disconnected from everyday human life. I mean, there are so many kind of oppressive situations in the world of actual slavery, in fact, where there is no fucking sign whatsoever that the master wants to be recognized by the slave as a full human being. I mean, you think that anybody in Old South lost any sleep over the fact that their slaves may not have liked them or didn't see themselves reflected in the master or vice versa? And it makes no fucking sense. I think people at the top of these hierarchies are just invested in the continuation of the hierarchy. Like they're invested in the existence of slaves. In a sense, they're really invested in their whole livelihood and status depends on what is presented here as the ultimate goal not happening. I don't see this fucking human drive for universal recognition. Like, think about people who are in one instance or another below you on the social strata. Like, let's say fast food workers. Do you even like fully think of them as human? As in to say, yeah, I mean, you would be upset if they were rude to you, but basically they're just people who are fulfilling a basic function. And that's how we interact with most people to one degree or another.
Let's bring this down to earth by looking at a Reddit post by an incel. This person, by the username of I just want some friends, says, I wish I was appreciated by a human female. In order to fulfill oneself, to fully develop oneself, this person needs to be recognized by the foreign subject. Yet, at the same time, because he does not recognize a woman as fully human, as evidenced by females deserve the rope, he can never fully receive such recognition. This leads to a downward spiral in which neither he nor the women he encounters can engage in mutual recognition. The incel is not able to develop himself as a person because he has not been given recognition by the other, and he sees this as an injustice done against him, but it's important to see that he is at fault in the sense that he does not recognize the recognition he demands as valid.
So the ironic thing about this whole video is that it attempts to show how we're not in fact atomized beings with our own thinking and awareness determining our reality. In fact, we are constantly interdependent with others. And this master-slave dialectic is brought up here, where of course, there's a continuous tension there. There's a continuous interaction. And then effectively, in this example, he completely undermines it if you really dig deep into it. That is to say that he says that women don't grant incels recognition because incels basically prevent that recognition from ever arriving to them. They're blocking it because of their wrong mindset. So in fact, incels atomatize themselves based on presumably their own awareness, not on any kind of interactions with women, because they preclude any interactions with women. So it doesn't really fit into the master-slave narrative, because in a master-slave narrative, that would mean that the master comes in and says, I'm ready to recognize you, slave. And the slave says, no, I don't fucking recognize you. In which case, the whole problem would shift toward the slave. And that possibility, that is to say, it would shift toward the individual, and presumably in this simplistic dichotomy toward Descartes.
Another consequence of this Hegelian view is that freedom is not something that humans have by default, nor is it something that I could develop while living in isolation. Rather, freedom is something that develops intersubjectively. I become free when I am treated like a free person by others. However, because of the necessity of recognition, this can only happen if, conversely, I treat the other as a free person too. If I am treated like a free person, and I treat the other as a free person in turn, I begin to see myself reflected in them, and can only then affirm my own selfhood.
This is a complete load of bullshit. I mean, look at the history of humanity, from the Mongol Empire to the British Empire, to slavery, to the Russian Empire, to whatever, the Roman Empire, the Greeks. I mean, did these people in any way behave as if they had some sort of an intrinsic drive to see themselves in the other? I mean, this is the anomaly. It is not by any means a universal human drive. And it's just kind of goofy to present it as such, and really seems to me completely disconnected. People have completely experienced their freedom, with that freedom being at the expense of others. People were willing to die for that freedom, that is to say, for the freedom to enslave others or to oppress others. I mean, it has happened throughout human history continuously. This seems to me like a complete load of shit, at least the way they're presenting it. But let me kind of lay out my own kind of theory of incels. Where do incels come from? So the first step is social isolation. Social isolation, not just from females, but from males as well. Because if you listen to a lot of these incels, this is what they talk about. I fucking haven't interacted with anybody in months, in weeks, and whatever. So once this isolation has formed, once this cocoon has formed around them, it is then difficult to acquire friends. In fact, it is difficult to acquire friends in the modern world where people move around so much, and when there are so many entertainment options that people are less compelled to be social. And so, you know, you really have like high school and college, and maybe if you have like a good job, where good as in like socially, you know, right for social interaction good. But in most cases, like really high school and college, and then there's like a steep drop off for ability to connect with new people. So when a heterosexual male really wants to burst out of this isolation, really wants to burst out of the bubble, of course they want to connect with females, not males. That is to say, if you're lonely, your ultimate antidote to loneliness is a lady friend who stares into your eyes and gives you gentle kisses, right? Kisses away your tears. You know, you're in so tear. Well, maybe I've gone too far into my own personal desires, but you know what I mean. Like whenever I feel lonely, I don't exactly envision myself hanging out with some bros. And I'm like very antisocial, and at this point I don't even like envision myself with a female a lot of the time. So I really want meta incel. I need a hermaphrodite or something, a celestial hermaphrodite in my head. I need to fucking visualize them like a Buddhist deity. So then they find the community of incels, and then it begins to define their reality and self. And here I'd like to dump some Buddhism on you, like Buddhist philosophy only, okay? Just my Buddhist psychological, philosophical theory for it, or just at least a motto. I'm not even saying that I completely believe in it, but just some food for thought, okay? So in Buddhism, the self is an illusion. The self is an illusion, and I would just say it in a simple way, because like awareness moves on to different forms. Of course, in religious Buddhism that talks about reincarnation, but not just that. It can be easily viewed as like, you know, you had a form of a child, your awareness had. You were defined by your childish desires, and then you moved on and on. And so now looking back at your childish desires, that person is no longer you, but you're connected to that person by the flow of awareness. We kind of grasp at some solidity. We come up with a conception of the self that's not grounded in impermanence and continuous motion and change, and we really grasp at it. So like when people say, you know, you've disrespected me, well, who did you disrespect? Did it have a material effect on your life? In many cases it didn't, unless you're in prison and respect is important so as not to be fucked in a prison shower. But in many cases it's not. It's just somebody has offended your idea of self, around which your life rotates, but which upon analysis doesn't exist in concrete terms. This kind of gets to grasping and what is defined as attachment, usually translated, but actually grasping. You define your happiness as an acquisition of an object that's then going to be connected with yourself. So it's just one illusion of projected happiness that's going to be experienced by the self that in the end doesn't really exist. And so we're always kind of creating new attachments and desires, and then we suffer in relations to them, or we suffer in relation to something that we have lost, when in fact that loss was more complicated, I guess, than it appears. So with incels, they're of course very attached to the beginning to the idea of connecting with a lady friend, getting that lady. And the lady at that stage might even be hyper idealized. And then when they see that woman, like everybody else, doesn't fit this hyper-idealized idea, and in fact they can't connect with this idea for a variety of reasons. They could be socially awkward and not interact with women at all. They could be going for a woman who's out of their league or who doesn't like them. Pain of that attachment, and then it then becomes projected on a woman, and then they find a community that reinforces a new kind of edgy sense of self, the sense of self of being a complete loser. So one would think that a person wouldn't find comfort in that sense of self, but they do. And they in fact get trapped into it. They reinforce it again and again with each other. And they find comfort in this continuous expression of pain and self-pity. And I'm sure, some of this pain and self-pity I'm sure is legitimate, but I'm just saying. In the end, they're kind of stuck behind this. Their commitment to this identity of being a loser and their own kind of desires or attachment to this idealized woman that they don't believe no longer exists, and then the woman becomes repellent. Repulsion, at least from a Buddhist point of view, is as much of an illusion as idealization. And so they're just kind of caught in this kind of cycle of self until they kill themselves or whatever the fuck else happens with incels. Maybe they run people over with a bus. But whether you want to accept this Buddhist motto or not, the thing is that no matter how you look at it, interactions with actual women don't enter into the equation. The woman is just a symbol for connection with humanity. And when they can't achieve that connection, they blame the woman and they dump all the hatred for humanity on the woman. And in fact, they live in a parallel reality where, like, not only are women caricatured, but males are as well. I mean, they're really preoccupied with these chads that barely exist. I mean, these kind of buff guys who fucking work out a lot and fuck a lot of girls. I mean, they're out there, but it hardly like describes any more than like 3% of the male population, or I mean something like that. So they live in that kind of caricature world that they reinforce continuously. The wider truth of it, that actual real life women barely enter into the equation. That there isn't some sort of a master slave, it's just a slave with an idea of the master, with the idea of the horrible master, when the slave in themselves might not be such a slave to the extent that they imagine themselves to be. Is that clear, my dudes? Must I go on? So I think that this whole kind of Hegelian analysis of this is basically bullshit on a variety of ways, in a variety of points that I have already demonstrated to you, my dudes. Now let's get to something important.
I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters, and I'm sorry in advance for any names I mispronounce. Rooftop Korean, Industrial Robot, Kelly Rankin, John Drum, No, Yvonne.
My friends, I'd like to sincerely thank my patrons. Just recently, actually, as I was filming this video, I happened to catch a notification when I took a break, and I got another patron, 23 so far. It really means a lot to me. Like, my dudes, it's really nice to get the money, of course. It's all about the money. But aside from that, just the idea of getting money, if that makes sense to you, or the idea of this channel being able to be something, I don't know, to generate money, I guess. Just that idea of it, that is to say, like, next month would have been like a year that I've been working on it. Now, I haven't been working on it consistently in the beginning because actually after I launched my first few videos, I actually had an incel-like experience where a very attractive girl kind of strung me along for 3 weeks, where we were texting and she kind of promised that we're gonna meet, and I used to like send carefully compose these texts every few days to see. I was like, hey, are you doing anything Thursday? I'm free, and I should, and it's like all this shit was really taxing to me, man. You really could fucking meet somebody in 3 weeks unless you're a fucking president of a country. You really could, and she didn't. So I got, I wrote her a long kind of emo letter, sharing my feelings, and I actually made a video about it to this channel that I have since deleted. Hey there. Nobody gives a shit about this channel, and nobody knows who the fuck I am, and really nobody has any real attachment to watching this shit. And so I decided to up the ante by talking about more shit you don't give a shit about. But there is a universal theme here, and the theme is being rejected by a girl in my case, because I am a heterosexual. My dudes, that was all a fucking distraction. What I really want to say is that I really appreciate it. Like, basically, let's say around a year of working on it, it's nice to get something back, and not just in terms of money, but just kind of be successful at something at YouTube. Unfortunately, I'm really successful at Patreon relative to my actual numbers, my subscribers. So the only thing that I have outperformed here on YouTube is e-begging, but I guess it's like better than nothing. But I sincerely appreciate everybody who contributed to my Patreon, and I will put more content on Patreon and hopefully make it worth it. Aside from of course the pity party for me, which is always worth it. But again, thank you, my dudes and my ladies. Thank you for anybody who contributed. It doesn't matter how much you contributed, man. The actual amount isn't important. What's important is that amount relative to your earnings, dude. And only you know if you could have given more. Just joking around, just kidding. Thank you to everybody. Thank you. And there was something else I wanted to say. And this is this. Don't doubt yourself, man, in life. A lot of people told me, like in my previous a video announcing Patreon, they said, Ivan, this approach of screaming, give me $1, you cunt, will never work on Patreon. Give daddy $1, give me $1, you're a piece of shit. It's never gonna work. Well, boy, were they wrong, man. So pursue your dreams, my friends. Pursue your dreams. So again, thank you to everybody, and have a good day, night, whatever.